All right, greetings, peace, and power elevation be to all of you. This your girl Tiffany coming through here live in effect. And tonight's conversation is going to be about the Bakongo people. So a day ago, I did a subject on the Mbundu people. So both the Mbundu people and the Bakongo people come from the same area, which is the Congo, right? They come from the Congo, they're both Congolese. Um, And why is it important to talk about the Bakongo people? Because again, they, just like the Mbundu people, were also brought here to the Atlantic during the transatlantic slave trade. Okay. So most of them were brought in the area of Georgia and South Carolina area. And then the rest of them were sent over to South America. All right. So that's why they are important to talk about, because we come from a descendant of those people. Hey, how you doing? How you doing, Buffalo Soldiers? How you doing? How you doing, sister? Yeah, but we come from a descendant of those people. Okay. So it's very important, by us being creolized Africans here in the diaspora, why not talk about our own descendant? Right. And it's Black History Month, so we should get into it. All right, so there's going to be some sources I'm going to use. So one of the sources is going to come from this book right here, The Africanism in American Culture by Joseph E. Holloway. And then another one is For Every Season, The Complete Guide to African American Celebration, Traditional to Contemporary Naming Ceremonies, Holidays, Weddings, and Family Reunions. Barbara Ecole, or Ecole. Right, so all right, then. I'll still be here, hopefully. The Bakongo were also in Cuba. That's where Palo comes from. You're right about that. Absolutely. You're right. You're right about that. Yes. So Palo, what's it called? Payo Mayambe. I think that's the name of it. Yeah, that also, yeah. Yeah, so you're right about the Cuban people. They are also Bakongo descent. And see, what people don't know about the Bakongo people and the Mbundu people, they are a part of the Bantu tribe or the Bantu expansion. Okay. So, yes, we do have the Bantu in us as well. All right. But let me go ahead and get into the sources that I want to use for tonight. All right. So it's plenty of sources here. So I'm gonna start with the first one. And I want to make sure you guys can see the screen. Okay, there we go. So this coming from Africa 101 Last Tribes. So the Bakongo are a Bantu nation near the mouth of the Congo River that primarily defined as the speaker of Kikongo, which is the language. Now it says the Bakongo, numbering 3 to 4 million, live in West Central Africa in a roughly triangular area extending from Pointe Noire, Republic of Congo in the north, to Luanda, Angola in the south, and inland to Kinshasa, the Democratic Republic of Congo. All right. So if you look on the map right here, it'll show you the areas where the Bakongo people are located. All right. So now let's go down here to where it says demography. In 1960, the Congo population in Zaire was approximately 951,000, not including the city of Kinshasa, whose population of 70,000 was about half Congo. A similar number of Bakongo were located in Congo, okay, with a corresponding concentration in Brazzaville. By 1970, the population of the major urban areas had tripled. It continued to grow thereafter, although since 1990, there has been some return to the rural areas for economic and political reasons. Demographic information pertaining to the Bakongo of Angola is lacking. Northern Angola was embroiled in civil war during most of the 30 years after 1960s, when thousands of Congo refugees moved temporarily to Zaire. In general, the Bakongo of Zaire are much more documented than those of either Angola or Congo. All right, so the language is Kikongo, which is a Western Bantu language whose several dialects constitute group H of Mgatharies classification, and a form of Kikongo called Kilita function as a lingua franca for many Congo-related people further east. The younger generation of Bakongo in Congo and Zaire, especially in the city, speaks only Lingala, which is increasingly becoming the national language of Zaire. So these are the people of the Congo. All right, these are the Bakongo people, as you can see in the picture right here. Okay. Now the clans of the Congo people, right? The major sub-tribe exclusive of the eastern tribes covered by the Mataran and Baja or Bayanda, they was it Dikide. I don't know how to say some of these words. Mbiko, Mbisi, or Bambisa, so on. And then you go down here, you see it said Bashi Congo, right in the west along the Atlantic coast. Hungu is in the south. They are reported by two sources to have been tributary to the Congo state. Was it Kakongo in the southwest, north of the mouth of the Congo River? They're not an integral part of the empire. Mbaba in the southwest, Mbata in the east, Miss Orogo, which is in the center around the capital, and Pangu in the northeast, and Zombo, which is in the east. All right, so these are the sub tribes of the Congo people, right? Right, as you can see. So it says settlement. All right, besides the capital city of Brazzaville and Kinshasa, the principal urban centers are the ports of Pointe Noire, Mtadi, and Borna. Bakongo predominate in many towns of their home region, but also found in towns and cities throughout their respective countries in their own rural areas. Bakongo live in scattered villages, varying in population from a few dozen to a few hundred persons, constructed of adobe, burned brick, or wattle and daub, with roofs of was it thatch or was it congregated iron. The houses shelter single individuals or married couples. Usually there are two rooms, the inner one reserved for sleeping or storage. A separate kitchen at the back of the house is the center of the female domain. All right. Now, do these houses look familiar? Yeah, they look very similar because you can see some of these same structure in America. Like if you go into the rural towns in America, right? If you go into the country, right? And you see like the historical landmark, you'll see houses that are built just like this or similar to it. Okay. But here in America, we call them shacks. That's what we refer to them as shacks. But they have a similar structure just like this. But anyways, let's go down to the economy. Subsistence and commercial activities. Most men and many women work and seek work in urban areas for most of their working lives. The rural population consists disproportionately of children and elderly people. In urban areas, wages are rarely sufficient to support even a single individual. Therefore, people depend on innumerable petty occupation, legal and illegal, to make ends meet. In rural areas, families export as much as food to town as they can, earning cash with which to pay taxes and school fees, and to buy hardware, clothes, and small luxuries. Domestic animals include goats, sheep, pigs, and poultry. Commercial cattle ranches supplies meat to the towns. The Bakongo grow mayonic, several kinds of yam, maize, peanuts, and various pulses, as well as bananas, avocados, citrus fruits, and palm nuts. A major handicap to the rural economy is expensive and unreliability of transportation. After 1985, the national economy virtually disintegrated, leaving most Bakongo, urban and rural, in dire straits. So, the industrial arts in rural areas, some men weave baskets and mats, and a few continue the traditional techniques of iron working. A few women make pots. Now, the trade villages within reach of a truck route may hold a market on Saturdays. Unlicensed traders bring manufactured goods from town for sale or barter, and may make cash advances to rural producers. In town, most women supplement their income by buying goods in small quantities and sell still smaller amounts, but a certain number have become successful wholesalers and importers. All right, division of labor. Although both men and women work for wages when they can, men predominate in the better paying and more prestigious occupation. In rural areas, men cultivate forest crop, including fruit trees, whereas savanna crops are appropriate to women. Men hunt, women fish, and catch small rodents. All right. So land tenure, in principle, in Zaire, all land belongs to the state from which commercial developers may obtain use rights. In practice, in rural areas unattractive to capitalists, traditional rules of land tenure prevail. Land is owned by matrilineal descent groups called houses and is available for use to the members of the house, to unmarried women, and to the children and grandchildren of male members. Fruit trees also inherit maternally, are owned separately from the land on which they stand. Okay. So here's another person that's part of the Bakongo tribe. All right. And there's another individual. So kinship, kin groups and descent. In Zairian law, all traditional kinship groupings have been abolished and replaced by a modified type of European family. In practice, every Mukongo identifies himself by referencing to his mother's clan and the village in which it is domiciled, right? Or exogamous local selection of each matrilineal clan are divided into land-owning houses, and these in turn into lineage function as inheriting groups. Then you go down kinship terminology. Bakongo can trace their relationship to others through only one of several routes. Depending on the situation, two persons occupying the same status with respect to any third party are said to be siblings in Pengi. When reckoned is by clans, this principle generates a terminological pattern of the crow type in which mothers, brothers, daughters is equated with child in Wana, and father, sister, daughters with fathers say. When reckoning is traced from individual to individual, the pattern becomes Hawaiian, meaning that all cousins are called sibling. Most kinship terms apply to relatives of either sex. All right, so it goes into marriage and family. Monogamy is required by law, but many men have long-standing quasi-domestic relationship with more than one woman. Traditionally, marriage with a classificatory patrilineal cross cousin was preferred, but no one may marry into a closely related lineage. Couples are expected to go through traditional wedding formalities, but official recognition is extended only to legally registered marriages. A man is obliged to support his children whether he's married their mother or not, and there is no status of illegitimacy. Domestic unit. By tradition, a married woman and man have separate budgets. The wife being responsible for the provision of food, itself of meat, and the husband for clothes and other bought goods. Each deposes, each disposes independently of any surplus, but in Zaire, the government favors making women dependent on their husband. Children are raised corruptibly by neighboring and related women. Inheritance. Increasingly, especially in urban areas, children inherit from their fathers. All right. So let's see. All right. So let's go down to where it says social control. Elders are believed to exercise a kind of witchcraft on behalf of their dependents, but also to use it against them should they feel that their wishes have been ignored. They may also be accused of misusing this power. Witchcraft capacity is said to be acquired from other witches for a fee, ultimately requiring the sacrifice of a relative to be eaten by the witch coven. And the conflict, the Bakongo have a reputation as a nonviolent people. Physical violence is, in fact, rare among them, although they think of themselves as under constant attack by hostile relatives and neighbors, witches exercising occult powers. Appropriate committees of elders mediate disputes, and diviners may be consulted in serious cases. Often, the diviner is a prophet of a Christian denomination. All right, and then here go a Bakongo sister right here. And for those of you out there, you see what she got going on. She got braids. Okay. Now, for those of you running around here talking about you're not African, this, thing, other, well, you might not want to walk around here with braids in your hair. Because where you think the hair braiding and the Bantu knots came from? It came from these people right here, okay? So Africans, they wore braids as a celebration, right? As part of the ceremony. So that's why they wore braids. They wore Bantu knots for a reason, okay? That was part of the celebration and ceremony. And also, when it came down to different designs, as far as like braiding designs is concerned, during slavery, it was a way to give a route or direction to get off the plantation and to head to another state or another city. Okay, so by women getting their hair braided a certain type of style, right? It was a way for slaves to even know what direction they was going and how to get off the plantation. So in a way, that was scientific. It was very clever. They were very intelligent by doing so. All right. Now, let's see where we gonna go. Religion and expressive culture. So the Bakongo are Christians, mostly Catholic, but with a strong Protestant minority in all three countries, affiliated with the British, U.S., and Swedish Evangelical Mission. Church-related schools and hospitals provide the best available education and medical care. Between 10 and 15% of the population belong to the local Pentecostal churches, most of which trace their origin to the celebrated Congo prophet Simon Kimbangu, or is it Kimbangu? Yeah, Kimbangu, who preached and healed the sick for a few months in 1921 before being imprisoned for life by the Belgian authorities. His son Joseph de Anjiga founded and led the now International Church of Jesus Christ on the Earth by the prophet Simon Kimbangu. All right, Kimbanguist related movements have included Kakism in Congo in the 1930s and Tokoism in Angola in 1950s. Okay. So let's look at the arts. So indigenous arts, including sculpture and music, have been also entirely suppressed by the European influence. The traditional pentatonic scale can still be heard in the songs of women, especially as sung at funerals and in connection with the cults of twins. A variety of percussion instruments and idophones are employed at parties and religious service. In, in Kinshasa, the Bakongo contributes substantially to Zaire's internationally famous popular dance music. So let's get into medicine. Bakongo of all walks of life commonly consult healers and magical experts to deal with not only illnesses but also affliction such as marital disputes, unemployment, traffic accidents, and theft. Such experts concentrated in the towns include non-Bakongo. A distinct is made between afflictions sent by God, which are natural, and those which an element of witchcraft is involved. Sufferers and their families commonly essay a series of treatments for the same problem, visiting both the diviner and the hospital. Death and afterlife. Funerals are important occasions on social gathering and family expenditure. Ideally, the bodies of the dead should be taken back to their natal villages if death occurs in town. Cemeteries are considered to be dangerous place not to be visited casually. The land of the dead is thought as a situated on the other side of a body of water, sometimes identified with the Atlantic. The life of the dead continues that on the living in another place, but inverts it in such a way that to the dead who become white, nighttime is daylight. All exceptional powers among the living are thought to be obtained from the dead, either legitimately, as in the case of chiefs and elders, or illegitimate in the case of witches. And modern belief, benevolent powers from the land of the dead tend to be consolidated under the name Holy Spirit, and evil powers as Satan. So now, these are the artworks, okay? Well, these are like the sculptures, statues, as you can see. Okay, it's called Inkizi objects. That's what they're called, Inkizi objects. All right. So, anyways, yeah, hold up. Okay, so I'm back. Ooh, child, I done logged myself out. But let's talk about it. So, what's very common is like when you go to New Orleans, right? They have what's called the Congo Square. So the Congo Square is an area in New Orleans where, the slaves will go and attend to for like celebration on Sundays. When they get off the plantation, they go down there. It's a celebration. They'll have their drumming, they'll have their rain shout, they'll do all of that. Okay. So if you ever go and visit New Orleans, go into the downtown area, look for Congo Square. It's down there. And also in Savannah, Georgia, they have a church called the First African Baptist Church. If you go inside the First African Baptist Church, right, they have the Congo Cosmogram. All right. So with the Cosmogram inside the church, it's placed on the floor. And then they have an area where there's an Arabic writing on it. Okay. Yeah, there's an Arabic writing. So the the Congolese, especially those who were Bakongo people, right? They played an integral role in the Americas. Okay. They left a trademark here. So when you go to places like South Carolina, as I mentioned before yesterday about Charleston, the weaving basket and a lot of the stuff they do out there is like it comes from the origin of those from Angola and the Congo areas. Okay. So they practice their tradition for the most part. They pretty much retain a lot of African tradition within Charleston, South Carolina. And also in Columbia as well, but more so in Charleston. and I say this all the time, in the South, especially in the South, there's a lot of African traditional practice in the South. So a lot of African custom can be found here, especially when you go to Georgia and South Carolina region, Florida, Louisiana, you'll find, and Mississippi, you'll find a lot of African practice in those states. Okay. It shows that we built those structures from memory of where we came from. Wonder if those same structures were in Europe. That's a good question. Who knows? That's a good question. Hey, brother Kevin, how you doing? You might. I mean, I don't really know. You only way you will find out is if you take a DNA test. That's the only thing I could tell you. If you take a DNA test, you will find out. All right, so let's go ahead and let's go into Africanism and American culture. All right, then. So let's talk about the Gullah Geechee for a moment, right? Now it says Congo Angola was the home of Bakongo civilization and Bantu speaking people whose language is Kikongo. Kikongo linguistics presence in Gullah Creole is demonstrative. Gullah Indoko is is it Bobangi Bobangi, which is Kikongo, meaning a bewitching that is said to cause illness. Indoko is also a version of what in Kikongo is Indoki, meaning sorcerer or witch. Also, the Gullah name Nzambi is Kikongo for God. Many scholars even suggest the name Gullah is a shortened form of Angola. The Central African Mbundu ruler was called the Angola, from which the Portuguese named the colony. There is obvious similarity between Angola and Gullah, which went through various spellings, but equally significant and generally overlooked is the African influence from the Windward Coast region. Gola, sometimes spelled Gola with a H, is the name of a large group of Africans from the Liberian hinterland. Golas were heavily preyed upon by neighboring Mende, Vai, and Mandicas and were imported into the Sea Islands region of South Carolina, Georgia, at the height of rice and indigo cultivation. Africans from Upper Guinea shared a common social religious bond that provided a certain cultural uniformity through mandatory secret societies. Names related to these societies appear in Gullah Creole. All right. And why is that? So, because of these tribes, right, they came from different areas of Africa. They came from different parts of West and Central Africa. They had to come together and join forces to create an identity, to make us who we are today, to create a distinct language, a cultural practice, so that could be passed on down to the next generations to come. Okay. Mhm. So let's see what else can we find in this book. Let's look up. Let's see what else can we find in this book. All right, so watch this. It says throughout the South. Hold on. Okay, after the 1920, things began to change and they started placing wildflowers on or a lily on the grave. In Central and West Africa, it is believed that unless the dead person has proper funeral, their spirit will not join with the ancestors and will wander as well as cause problems and harm in the community. Part of the proper funeral involves the placement of items used by the dead on top of the grave. This is still practiced in numerous Bantu and West African cultures. In short, great pains are taken to provide for a proper carryover. When a possum died in the house, if you take them out of for the Mister say few words, then their spirit will hang the house because they just can't be happy till they have everything done proper and right. Okay. So I'm not good with Geechee like that. So basically says the Gullahs, like their African ancestors, did everything to pacify the spirit. They further placated. Yeah, they further placated the spirits of the dead by placing their things on the grave. They put things on the grave so they be handy for the spirit and he be satisfied. By satisfying the spirit, they keep the spirit out of the house. In eastern Nigeria, in Otisha, all the implements of the dead are placed before the corpse, tools, guns, and bags, as well as other implements in accordance with his profession. For a man of wealth, a bowl filled with cowries will be added to the collection. The place of articles is symbolical. They represent the equipment that the man will need in the underworld, the tools to enable him to prosecute his occupation, the money wherewith the rich man will be able to maintain his proper dignity. Small pots and bowls are generally placed in the grave to aid the departed in the spirit world. When the burial is finished, more amu are deposited on the top of the grave. On the grave of a woman, a small pot alone is placed. All right. So it says throughout the South, this custom was found in almost every southern state. In South Carolina, the most common items placed on the graves were bleached seashells, broken crockery and glassware, broken pitchers, soap dishes, lamp chimneys, tureens, coffee cups, syrup jugs, and all sorts of ornamental vases, cigar boxes, gun locks, tomato cans, teapots, and I ain't gonna either go further, right? But anyways, it says from early observation of this tradition in Sea Islands at a grave in Beaufort, the tradition of placing broken crockery and special household items have been substituted with pots and neatly placed artificial flowers, a combination of African pots and European flowers. All right, let me. Okay. Today, both blacks and whites bring flower pots to place on top of the graves. The present styles represent new forms of Africanism that have been substituted for more socially acceptable items, such as Dufoski and Kusal Islands, where there still exist strong elements of this custom. The more isolated the area, the stronger the Africanism. All right, so here's the thing: you can't get away from the African customs because you are already practicing the African customs anyhow. So you can't get away from it. So if you're a person, especially living in the South, you cannot get away from practicing the African ideology and customs because you're already doing it without even knowing it. Let me read. It says, I think one of the reasons why people have a hard time identifying the African connection is because African culture has always been projected in a toxic, exotic manner. Yes, it has been misrepresented. It has been looked at as something being demonic. So that's why people don't accept the African culture. But again, what many don't realize is that they are practicing the African culture. It just been synchronized in the Western culture. So, especially if you're in the South, once again, you're practicing African culture, but it's under disguise of the Western culture. But you are right, Brother Kevin. People do have a hard time accepting that. All right, so now let's go down. Today, for the most part, professional morticians now incorporate traditional ideas of styrofoams and plastic vases. Modern grave decoration incorporate elements of the African tradition of above grave decoration. New patterns of arrangement reflect the changing forms. In other words, the African forms have been African Americanized. Instead of pots, plates, saucer, cups, and medicine bottles, artificial pots and plaster flowers have now taken their place. All right. So it says at Coffin Point Cemetery, where the Coffin Plantation is still located, the same graveyard used by enslaved is still being used by their descendants today. Even though the graveyard is located in an all-white area in St. Helena, some new forms of Africanism and change in the style of the above grave decoration were observed. On the grave mound, resting on a single pot, which was placed in the center of the grave between two headstones similar to some Bantu styles. In Charleston, South Carolina, the same pattern appears in a black graveyard in the community of Red Top. Now let's go down. In the older days, when making the headstone, they would place the dead person's favorite plate in the cement before it hardened. And if the person had requested some special food before he died, the food was prepared and placed in the grave or on the grave. I carried the kind of food we used to have to eat on the days he was off room work. I take cooked chicken and cake and pie and cigars. This is still common in most African society from the Senegambia to Angola and found in places where Africans were enslaved throughout the New World, Brazil, Venezuela, Jamaica, and most of the West Indies. The South Carolina grave decoration were similar to the above grave decoration found among the Bakongo, Lumba, and Ovi Bandu from early travels accounts in Central Africa by missionaries. We can reconstruct the origin of placing objects on the grave. E.J. Glave, a 19th century explorer, traveled through the Congo and observed this Bakongo burial practice. The village burial practice presents a curious aspect, for the final resting place of a Congo chieftain is marked by Gotek display. All the cheap crockery which the deceased had been able to collect during his lifetime was stolen along in a was it oblong path on the grave and surrounded by a suggestive little margin of gene. All right. So this practice seems commonplace among the Bantu of the region. For example, in the Congo, Zaire, the natives mark the final resting place of their friends by ornamenting their graves with crockery, empty bottles, old cooking pots, etc., all of which articles are rendered useless by being cracked or perforated with holes. Also, broken crockery, little flags, images or of men or of men or beasts, either carved into wood or molded in clay, are often found tombs. The custom of placing object on top of the grave is African in origin. However, the style which survived in the Sea Islands was more closely related to the Bantu, particularly the Bakongo and the Ovim Ovimbindu in Angola, which places articles such as gourds, and instruments used in the burial on top of the graves. All right. So once again, a lot of African customs, a lot of African practices, such as people putting stuff at the graveside like flowers or gin or anything like that, right? It's still taking place. Even when, let's say you have a altar, right? You have an altar and you put the favorite thing that your loved one used to have or they used to love doing. Like if they love cooking, you'll put some pots over there. If they love to read, you'll put some books or whatever the case, whatever they enjoy doing, right? You'll put it right there in the altar. And it's very common with those who are in the African spiritual system, right? You'll see all the time when they have an altar, they put all the things in front of the altar. You know, when it, especially when it comes to like certain type of rishas, um, it's a way to pay homage. So they'll put like money on the altar. They might put like a drink over there. They might put a cigarette near it or whatever the case may be. Um, but see, again, the African tradition has not went anywhere. So whatever you want to identify as, right, it's still going to go back to that African origin. It's going to still go back into the African root. Dr. John Henry Clark said when he went to Ghana and mixed with the locals, he was blown away with the striking similarity between African culture and his Southern culture. Yes. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. It's unique. It's unique. It's very unique. All right, so let's go into the next book. For Every Season by Barbara Icole. Yes, I have. I have read up on the Dikinga and the Congo Cosmogram. I have. Let's see. Folks forget that even in the Black church, there were influences of African spirituality practices. And it still is. And it still is to this day. It still is to this day. As a matter of fact, speaking of that, the founder of Kagi, which stands for Church of God in Christ, right? He practiced, he was practicing some form of African tradition. Okay. He also practiced hoodoo. Yet the founder of the Church of God in Christ, Kagi, he also practiced hoodoo and he practiced some form of African spirituality. So with people who be sitting up there speaking in tongues and jumping up and down, having Holy Ghost and all of that, just know that your African ancestors was doing that for a long period of time. So in the beginning, they called that rain shout. So all you did was brought it into the institution. But you'll be surprised, the founders of these Black churches, right? Some of them have their roots and origin in African spirituality. And just like I mentioned, the founder of Kagi Church, the Church of God in Christ, he practiced hoodoo. He practiced African spiritual system. Okay, he was a practitioner of that. But then you got some people that say, oh, he was a devil worshiper, this, that, and other, because they operate from a European mindset. But no, what he did was he practiced African spirituality. He was connecting with the ancestors. If you go back into the origin of gospel music have its roots back into African spirituality. Mhm. Now, there's still a whole lot that I gotta know as far as the cosmogram is concerned, but I have read into it. But it's still a whole lot of information that I have to study in more details about. All right, so let's go ahead and get to this book right here. For Every Season by Barbara Ecole or Ecole. The complete guide to African American celebration, traditional to contemporary naming ceremonies, holidays, weddings, family reunions. Now watch this. Now she talk about the black coastal Georgians, right? Watch this. Slave of coastal Georgia referred to the vigil by the side of a deceased body before burial as setting up a wake. And this solemn ceremony in the 19th century revealed close connection to Nigerian rituals. Now it says Congos and their influence on Black Americans. In the Congo language, Enzo A. Inski means the grave. Is through reading about the customs surrounding these final resting place skillfully documented by the art historian Robert Ferris Thompson that we're able to assert fascinating correlation between the Congo Black North America and beliefs in the immoral soul. Okay. It says the Congo people also view tombs and coffins and mounds of burial site as containers of charm for the persistent soul. Therefore, they decorate Enzo a Inski with a headstone and other symbolic items for three distinct reasons: to pay homage to the earth and cave spirit, to guide it to Impimba, and to deter it from wandering among the survivors. Quite possibly, if you happen on black burial grounds in southern states or even in Haiti, Guadeloupe, or the West Indies, you might have noticed unusual items placed on graves other than the usual headstones, flags, and flowers. Each of these symbols have a traditional meaning, as in the following examples. All right. So it says many Congo and Congo influenced American grave sites are overlaid with items such as cups, drinks, drinking glass, and plates because these were the last object touched or used by the deceased. In the Congo, this ritual arose from a couple of beliefs. One is that the last strength of the deceased remains in these objects, so they act as catalysts for messages when they are touched by survivors. Okay. And the Congo people also accept the placement of such items, assure Kanga and Funya, which means time of the emation or evu efflula of a person, as well as time of the anger of the dead. For instance, consider this 1939 remembrance of black plantation life from the Georgia writers Project Drums and Shadows. They used to put the things a person used last on the grave. This was supposed to satisfy the spirit and keep it from following you back to the house. All right. Now, it says seashells. Watch this. So earlier, I know that Congo people view the land of the dead as a body of water called Mpimba, and this may well explain why they and the people of Angola trust the seashell to house the immortal soul to act as a communicative force between earthly and spiritual worlds. Here again, we find this Congo influence when we see seashells blanketing gravesite from Missouri, New Orleans, the Carolinas, and Florida to Haiti and Guadeloupe. If you visit Carolina lowlands, you will be enthralled with a masses of these ancient Congo ceremonial symbols, not only not only on the tombs of turn of the century men and women, but as a honorary armors on the grave of perished black soldiers of the Vietnam War. And should you go there and become overwhelmed by the magnitude of all your hearts and eyes regard, find peace in this Congo prayer to the Mbaba seashell. As strong as your house, you shall keep my life for me. When you leave for the sea, take me along that I may live forever with you. All right, and then she goes on to talk about planting trees. So in chapter 3, the naming tree was present as a unique option among the newborn naming ceremony, partly because of the being of Ivory Coast, practice a ritual of planting a cola nut so a tree would grow in honor of a child's birth. Now we celebrate the Congo ritual of planting a tree upon a grave because the being believed that trees symbolize the soul with roots traveling to the other world. Spiritual connection between ritual trees and grave sites continue to flourish in the black communities of Mississippi, South Carolina, and Texas, as well as in Haiti, resounding the motherland's message that as the message as the infinite barrel tree grows, it stands as a mighty emblem of the immortal soul. Hmm. All right. And so it says also, let's go down where it says light in all the splendor. As the ancient Congo set fires ablaze on grave sites to light the soul path to righteousness, their descendants resumed the practice of placing moderate lights on African American burial plots. Although lanterns are the most common means of glorifying the dead, images of automobiles with glaring headlights have also been spotted among cemetery regala, and a child's shiny metallic airplane adorn a Carolina resting place, urging the soul's speedy flash to heaven. All right, so if you guys want to learn more about the Africanism culture and practice in America, these are the books that you need to get. You got to get these two books. You got to put them on your bucket list. Um, all right, so real quick, cause just real quick, there's another article that I want to show you guys. Well, this is a dissertation, a thesis that came from somebody, right? It's called A Secular Lineage, the Bakongo Cosmogram and the Rain Shout of the Enslaved Africans and Their Descendants on the Georgia and South Carolina Sea Islands. Okay. A thesis presented to the faculty of the Graduate School of Cornell University in partial fulfillment of the required for the degree of Master of Professional Studies by Gabriel Peoples, and it came out in May of 2008. Okay. So let me go ahead and show it to you guys. Hold on. All right, so let's go into the Bakongo Cosmogram. So shout out to the person in the comment that brought it up. So let's go into that. All right, so it says, let me try to zoom that up for y'all. All right, so this is the Bakongo cosmogram, right? The peak of physical power, north, malice, and noon, right? So it says vertical line means connect. Small circle moments of the sun represent the human phase of life. All right. The arrow shows direction of movement, follow path of the sun in south hemisphere. Okay. Peak of spiritual powers, south and midnight. Below the line represents the world of spirit, and above the line represents the world of humans and human spirit. Okay. So as you can see, the circle represents water, passage through movement between water and two worlds. All right, so it shows the human spirit and the connection with ancestors, right? So that means as humans, you go through the cycle of life. And then once you go through the cycle of life, then you go back and return as an ancestor. So this kind of puts you into the mind of the concept of it puts you into the concept of the cosmic Yorbero. So the cosmic Yorbero is very similar to the Bakongo cosmogram. All right, because it shows like the cycle of life. You know what I mean? Birth and the death cycle. So that means when we come in as organism and we go back and we return to the universe. Okay, so that's what the cosmic Yoburo teaches, right? So it's very similar in the Bakongo cosmogram. You know, we go through the process as humans, and then we go back and return to the ancestors. So real quick, let me talk about this. See, in African spirituality and African culture, there was no such thing as heaven or hell. There's no such thing as heaven or hell in the African culture because they didn't believe in that. They didn't believe that when you die, you're going to go to hell or you're going to go to the heavens. You're just going to return back to the essence, or you make your transition and become an ancestor. That's what they believed in. So the idea of heaven and hell was non-existent in African culture. Now, when Abrahamic religion came along, then there were some people that started to follow with the concept of those ideas. But however, before the Abrahamic religion, there was no idea of heaven. There was no idea of hellfire. In fact, the African people were so in tune with nature. They were so connected with nature. Right. I say the kinga, the upper half is this world and the lower half is the spirit world. Right. So again, they didn't have to go through that process. So it was nothing to be afraid of. You know what I'm saying? The idea of death was not something that was looked as a bad thing because the ancestor understood that we all have a purpose here. We all have a purpose. And once you fulfill your purpose, your work has been done on this planet. Now it's time for you to make your transition off the planet. So death was nothing to be afraid of because death is a part of life. Death is a part of life. As a matter of fact, life is the beginning of death. But let's go ahead and let's continue on. Let me go ahead and put the sources back up for you. All right. So it says, as illustrated, human live in the realm above the horizontal or Kalunga line, the terrestrial world. Similar to the appearance of the sun, a human will rise or be birthed in the east and set to die in the west. In the realm of the spirit and ancestor, the submerged world, the opposite is true. Hence, a person is reborn in the west and begins to die in the east, only to begin the cycle again. So the Kalunga separates the biological from the spiritual. The vertical lines symbolize the biospiritual connection between humans and spirits. To name a few ways to connect this line can be accessed through words, music, and dance. Okay. Kim Kim Wadande Kia Banseki, tying the spiritual non-African cosmology of the Bantu, is one of the most comprehensive books that give insight into the system of mainstream Congo religion. As a native authority of Congolese culture, he illustrates the cycle of life and death in terms of increase and decrease that occurs within the cosmogram. His diagram enriches the understanding of what is happening on an energy level in the upper and lower worlds in figure 2 below. Okay. It says the energy of humans and spirits above, below the Kalunga. All right. So the diagram represents a continuous cycle of life, death, life, death. Cosmogram embellize the separation, connectedness, and communication between human, spirit, and ancestors. The Bakongo cosmogram is also a diagram of the cosmos that exemplifies Bakongo religious belief and was used in funeral ritual. Moreover, it is a sacred piece of art which one can take oath upon once drawn in the ground because it is believed that God's energy is present there. So the cosmogram is not only representative of a religious belief of the Bakongo people, but there are shared aspects of it throughout different types of African cultures. Its origin is as ancient and unknown as time. However, it can be said that the Bakongo cosmogram has at least existed since the origin of the Bakongo culture. All right. So now let's go back up to the beginning. All right, so let's go down to where it says Yoruba and Bakongo. All right. So it says the shadow bodies text and consciousness as a cipher of syncretism between Yoruba and Bakongo. All right. So it says when the gullahs stand or sit upright to engage in the rain shower, it is cosmographically significant. Whenever the Kalunga meets with the biospiritual, a crossroad is created, a virtual crossroad which is also represented directly by an African deity. Even though many Bakongo and even their descendant in South Carolina and Georgia focus on Nkisi as opposed to a pantheon of deities, the Yoruba did focus on a pantheon of deity. Gomez, who suggested more of a Bakongo influence on the rain shower, writes that in the case of South Carolina and Georgia, it is clear that the West Central Africans were the dominant group. These beliefs were expressed most clearly in the areas of religion in which the West Central African use of rain ceremonies was the main source for development of the rain showers. And to add what Gourmet stated, I suggest that there are gray areas where other numerically significant ethnic groups, such as the Yoruba, append their views with that of the Bakongo. These attachments further complicate and expand the scope of what the Bakongo cosmogram means. The Yoruba occupying Benin, Togo, Ghana, and Nigeria it also experienced significant direct importation to the Georgian and South Carolinian Sea Islands. The Yoruba's importation rate to South Carolina was the highest during the middle period of the transatlantic slave trade. Due to their importation directly to South Carolina, it is reasonable that their views found ways to meld with that of the Bakongo while preserving some fundamental Yoruba perspectives. Leland G. Ferguson notes this mending point in his essay concerning cosmograms found at the bottom of the bowls in South Carolina and writes that the basic feature of the cosmogram, the crossroad and underworld beneath the water, which were commonly held ideals all along the coast of West and Central Africa, would have been potential points of syncretism for the variety of people enslaved in the low country of South Carolina. So one point of syncretism between the Yoruba and the Bakongo is the crossroads. A Yoruba coming into contact with the rain shout might interpret the virtual crossroad created as the Orisha. Roboto Roboto explains that crossroads are pointed out as especially strong places for working magic. Just as magic is used to make things happen, so Isu Eleba, who also embodies magic, Eboto Roboto warns that it should be emphasized that it is the continuity of perspective that is significant, more so than the fact that the codes of particular African gods such as Shango and Ileba have been transmitted to the New World, even though the particularly of everything that the Yoruba practice in their religion is not present in the rain shout. The perspective of the Yoruba deity Isu Aleba is important to understand the complexity of the rain shout and the Bakongo cosmogram in the North American context. All right, so not to go any further, basically in this session, it shows that there was a connection between the Yoruba and the Bakongo people when it came down to the rain shout in the South Carolina and Georgia region. So there was a little bit of the syncretism of the Yoruba and the Bakongo practice taking place. All right. So if you guys want to look more into this, just look up a secular lineage, the Bakongo cosmogram and the rain shout of the enslaved Africans and their descendant on the Georgian and South Carolina Sea Islands. All right, that's all you got to do. Just look up that information. Now, here's the thing. If you guys think that the African tribes did not borrow from each other as far as like some of the cultural practices or spiritual practices, then that's where you become wrong. Because even with multiple tribes, right, they weren't always fighting amongst themselves, right? They weren't fighting against each other all the time. There were those that intermarried. And while they intermarried, they shared cultural ideals, and a lot of the cultural practice are very similar to each other. Why? Because again, they're in the Central West Africa region. But the practices are very similar to one another. Now, I'm going to tell a little story real fast. There's somebody that I work with, right? He's from the Mandinka tribe. He's from the Mandinka tribe, but he grew up with the Fulani people, right? He grew up in the Fulani community. He learned how to speak the Fulani language along with his Mandinka language. Okay? So it happens. You could come from another tribe and be raised in a community that speak a different language from the tribe that you're originally from. And you can intermarry with one another. Just like the Fulani and the Hausa people, they intermarry with each other. They intermarried before the transatlantic slave trade. So again, these tribes, their cultural practice, their spirituality are very similar. It's just they have their own nomenclature as far as like what they call their deities. Okay. But if you look at it, if you look at how they practice and, as far as like their customs are concerned, right, they're very similar. They very similar to one another. It's just a few minor differences. It's just what they identify as and what region they come from. But the practices are very similar. So just like we share a lot in common with those in the Caribbean, you know why? Because of our African connection. Because of our African identity and connection, we share a lot in common with those in the Caribbean. Because we have the similar ancestors they have, right? Just like we have ancestors that are Central West African, they have ancestors that are Central West African. They come from the similar tribes we came from. So we share a lot in common with those from the Caribbean island, especially those from Haiti. And you're going to see Haiti being brought up a lot. You're going to see Haiti being brought up a lot because Haiti played an important role in America. And a lot of Haitian played an important role within the Black community. All right. So there's a lot of connection. There's a connection between, and speaking of South Carolina, there's a connection between those in South Carolina and those in the Bahamas. And not only in the Bahamas, but also in Barbados. There's a lot of similarity, especially how they speak, the accent. You can hear it because they both have the African native tone. I'm pretty sure the Bakongo converted to Catholicism early and were the first African to do so. Yes. Now, yes, they did only because when the Portuguese came to Angola in the Congo region, right? A lot of them were practicing the Catholic religion. And if you look into the history, you will learn about Don Kimpa Vita, right? Kimpa Vita was a young lady from the Congo who started the Antonian movement. So the Antonian movement was a revolutionary version of the Catholic religion. So yes, a lot of them did convert it into Catholicism. A lot of them did because of the Portuguese. So when the Portuguese came over there, they brought their religion along and it influenced a lot of them. And then there was some of them that did not even convert. And then there was some of them that revolutionized like Don Kimpa Vita did. Don Kimpa Vita, she revolutionized the Catholic religion and called the Antonian movement. And she said God was from the Congo. She said Jesus was a black man before the idea of the black man came about. She said Jesus was African. He was black. He was from the Congo. And her movement, she was rebelling against the Portuguese. She already knew what the Portuguese was up to. And she let it be known to the king at that time period, King Pedro. But he wasn't trying to hear her out. He was like, nah, go somewhere with all that. I don't want to hear that. But she was trying to give him games like, Let them know up front, like, hey, these people ain't up to no good. They over here trying to take over. And she was right. Now, she was in her early 20s at that time. Don Kipa Vita was in her early 20s. Okay? And she died. She was executed. Now, I believe the movement is still around to this day. The Antonian movement is still around. As a matter of fact, you can read more into it. Just I'm gonna put the title of the book up, and I also did a video about her in the past. So I posted the title in the chat so you guys can look more into it. But yeah, they were one of the first people that did convert it into Catholicism, to answer your question. All right, so let me look at the comments. Somebody put, that's why it kills me when black folks who are in church going Bible believers who demonize African spirituality but overlook and blind themselves how African spirituality influenced the black church. Of course. And also, as African society were multi-ethnic, so of course there would be cross-cultural exchange between ethnicities. Yes, there were cross-cultural exchange. And if people say otherwise, then they gonna have to show and prove that it wasn't. But you can't sit here and tell me there wasn't no cultural exchange between multiple ethnic group from Africa. You can't tell me that, because there was some form of influence that, and you can't tell me there was no intermarriage taking place between different ethnic groups, because again they were influenced by each other. They married among themselves, so it wasn't always a tribal war taking place like we like to think. Okay, that's why it kills me when black folks who are in, okay, I think you already posted that up. I think you already posted it up before. All right. Right, facts. That person that you talking about, Kevin, they don't know any better. That's because they have not studied deep into the information. They have not studied deep into the cultural practices. See, they only know about the tribal wars, but they don't know about the cross-cultural exchange because they have not studied enough information. You have to really read more in details. Okay, you can't just operate from confirmation bias and just be stuck there. So it's a lot of things that people don't know, but it's up to that person to actually study and do the research. Look more into details. Hmm. So, anyways, you guys, that's all I have for tonight. Thank you all for watching. I appreciate it. Shout out to the brothers and sisters in the chat. Thank y'all for coming through. Thank you for your comments. I appreciate your comments on here. All right. And I will keep you guys posted. So there's going to be more information that I'm going to talk about. So the next topic, I'm looking to talk about the Ewe tribe. So I'm going to dig up some information about the Ewe tribe and then going to go from there. All right. So until next time, may peace and power elevation be to all of you. This your girl Tiffany, and I'm logging off. So you guys be safe and enjoy this wonderful Black history. and I will keep you guys updated. Peace.